Cairo local time. Okay. So let's start. I'm going to ask our colleague from ICF Egypt if you can start admitting people, because I get engaged in the presentation and lose focus on anything else. And I don't want people to be stuck in the waiting room. Okay? Okay, great. So my name is Amira Badawy. I reside in Cairo, Egypt. So we're coming to you from near the pyramids and near Sphinx, who was trending on the internet yesterday. I am a professional certified coach from the International Coaching Federation, and I have been coaching since 2017. And early on, I had decided that I wanted to specialize in occupational burnout. Now, the origin of the word is occupational burnout. Sometimes we drop the word occupational just for, ease, but it originated in that context, occupational burnout. Of course, with COVID and everything, the word burnout has been used extensively, and it might be used, in an informal way to refer to different things. So what we're talking about today is occupational burnout and how coaching could help people who might be going through burnout. So the first thing I like to do is a definition. I think it's very important that we define what burnout is. So burnout, it's the psychological response that happens when somebody is exposed to prolonged chronic emotional and interpersonal stress on the job. And the word burnout itself, its origin, it lies in two places. First, the language origin comes from like a candle. If you light a candle and you leave it burning, what will happen? Eventually, it will burn out because the fuel in the candle is depleted. And this is what happens with burnout, where we had a spark, an internal flame that was burning inside of us and was motivating us to work and to be very diligent and proficient in our work. That flame, it starts to lessen until it extinguishes because our energy is depleted. But also the word burnout, or the term burnout, it came from addicts. One of the researchers, the early researchers in burnout, he heard this word, and this was in the 70s, used by addicts, and mainly heroin addicts, to describe their condition, how they felt. They felt depleted. So where we had energy, afterwards we feel exhausted. This is what happens with burnout. Where we were involved with what we were doing, when we're burned out, involvement turns to cynicism. Any self-efficacy that we had turns into ineffectiveness. So again, burnout, like the word, it's kind of, it explains itself that our energy is extinguished. Okay, so burnout, when it manifests in a person, it takes on three dimensions. And the research here was in the beginning of the 80s, and it coincided with the appearance of a new term called karushi, which it's a Japanese term, and it means death by overwork. So this word kind of evolved at the same time that they were doing research on burnout. And they found that when burnout occurs, it manifests, it shows itself in three dimensions. First, we have emotional exhaustion. The person who experiences burnout would typically say that I feel tired. Although it might appear as physical exhaustion, I'm tired physically, it's rooted in emotional exhaustion. There's a lot of emotions that we're carrying and we're not processing. And again, if we go back to the definition, We've been experiencing this for a prolonged period of time. It's chronic stress. It's not just normal stress. So we've been carrying these emotions around with us for a very long time. So we start to feel exhausted, tired. The second dimension is callousness and indifference. Now, some people think that burnout probably, occurs to people who we would define as or describe as slackers or lazy. But they found that actually burnout happens to the best employees, the employees who actually take upon themselves psychological ownership of their job. So they really have to do their job well. And what happens is when they're burnt out and they start to feel exhausted and their flame has been extinguished, they know that they can do better, but they are unable to tap into the source of motivation within them to do better, but they know that they can. So they start to feel guilty. And in order to deal with this guilt, they start to create a psychological barrier between themselves and the people that they are serving. And this appears in the form of callousness or indifference. And when we say the people they are serving, it really depends. Like a manager might get, or a leader might get burned out because of the heavy weight he carries in order to take care of his staff. So when his indifference and callousness is directed towards his employees or his subordinates. Somebody else, like a doctor or an engineer or somebody who deals with clients directly, the callousness and indifference might be directed towards his clients. Or with entrepreneurs, because also entrepreneurs are known to suffer from burnout, they might feel callousness and indifference towards their staff, their clients, their suppliers, because they're involved in everything regarding the company. So callousness and indifference, it really depends on who I'm servicing. And again, it's a psychological barrier that the person creates in order to deal with the guilt they feel when they feel like they're unable to perform at their best. And the final dimension is diminished accomplishments. Basically, we start to wonder, what are we doing? Is there any value in what I do every day? Why do I come to work? If I don't come to work, everything's going to be fine, I don't have any skills. So this is the third dimension, which is diminished accomplishments. And there is a self-reporting questionnaire called the MBI, or the Maslow Burnout Inventory. And it's named after Christina Maslow, which is one of the early researchers of burnout. And this self-reporting questionnaire, it consists of 23 questions that measure these three dimensions. Personally, I don't use this questionnaire in my practice, but it is a good thing to go through the questionnaire just to get an idea of how emotional exhaustion would manifest in a certain person, or the callousness and indifference. So when you're speaking to a client and they start to use these phrases, you can start to kind of, oh yes, this is emotional exhaustion. You can start placing them under the appropriate dimension. Okay. Okay. So burnout is related to stress. You really can't disassociate them from each other. But again, it's not just any kind of stress. It's exposure to chronic stress that has an interpersonal and emotional aspect to it. And again, another definition. When we define stress, stress is the body's reaction to change or to anything that requires an adjustment. And I mean, the body reacts to change physically, mentally, and emotionally, and of course, cognitively. And there are two types of stress, and I think all of us we've heard, there's good stress and there's bad stress. Good stress, which is also known as eustress, it's the kind of stress that keeps us motivated. It's probably the kind of stress that athletes feel on the pitch or, in the court when they're in a match. And it's, it's the second half of the match, and they're tied. And then all of a sudden you find them, they kind of rally together and they pick up the pace and they score a goal. The stress of tying and the match almost being over would motivate them to perform a little bit better. De-stress, and I think distress, we've all heard of distress. This is the bad kind of stress. This is the stress that induces an unpleasant feeling of tension, whether in our bodies or in our minds. And of course, this is the kind of stress that is linked to, reduced performance, anxiety, just feeling stuck. But the thing is, if you are exposed to stress, whether eustress or de-stress, for a long time, the good stress might turn into bad stress. So yes, there is a good stress and there's a bad stress, but it depends on if you don't take pockets of rest just to kind of like breathers. Continued eustress, which is the good stress, could also lead to burnout. So that's very, very important. So now I want to play a game with you guys. I told you it's going to be a little bit interactive. We're going to figure this out. Here we have 5 round objects. We have a balloon. We have a football or a soccer ball. We have a rubber ball. And think of, the rubber ball that's used in racquetball or squash. And then we have an orange and an egg. Item A, item B, item C, item D, and item E. Now I'm going to tell you a bunch of situations. I'm going to share with you a bunch of situations. And I want you to guess which item will fare better in each situation. And you can write your guesses in the chat box. Okay? Are you guys ready? Okay, let's see the first situation. Which item will or would bounce better? So imagine that we dropped all of these items from the same height. Which one would bounce better? A lot of people are selecting the rubber ball. Okay. But somebody selected the football. Okay, so it seems that the answers are between the rubber ball and the football. It makes sense that these two would probably bounce back better. Now let's look at the other options. If we drop a balloon, it'll probably, it won't bounce. If we're in an open area and there's a lot of wind, it could just fly away. We really don't know how the balloon is going to respond. If there's no currents of air, it might fall down and bounce. We can't predict how the balloon is gonna react. It's kind of it's a very free object. It does what it wants. For the orange, most probably if we drop an orange, it'll probably fall to the ground and remain stationary. It probably wouldn't bounce back. Now, if we drop an egg, it'll probably break and wouldn't bounce back. So it makes sense that the football and the rubber balls would bounce better. And it has to do with the nature of the material that they're made from. Like rubber, it has elasticity, so it allows it to kind of bounce. And also the football, it's filled with air, and the material around the air has some elasticity to it, so it'll also probably bounce. Okay. So let's look at the second situation. Now imagine that there's a target And I want to select one of these 5 objects to throw at the target. Which would be better for target practice? Okay, so we have C. A lot of people are selecting C, and we have also B, D, B and D, E. I love the people who select E, the egg. Okay. Okay. So there's people, nobody selected the balloon if I caught all of them. Again, because the balloon, it's very difficult to control the trajectory of the balloon. It'll go in all directions. So the balloon is probably out. A football, a rubber ball, or an orange or an egg, they have enough density for me to kind of throw it and aim it towards a certain item. Now, out of all of these, which would be better? Some people, they select an egg because it depends on the target. When I'm delivering this talk in person, a lot of people say, you know, if it's like somebody I don't like, I would rather throw the egg because it'll cause damage, which makes sense. But the orange and the rubber ball and the football, they have, again, enough mass or enough density. Yes, Erica, exactly. The egg will also break, or it'll leave a mark so you can be sure that you hit the target. There won't be any doubt. But again, all the B, C, D, and E, they all have mass and density so that you can kind of aim the object at a target and hopefully hit that target. Okay. Which would be easier to kick around? Now, imagine that you have like a toddler or a child who really doesn't know how to kick. Which one of these objects would be easier for this child or toddler to kick around? Yes, everybody's selecting the football because it makes sense. It's called a football because we kick it, right? Okay, there's B and C. So we're also thinking that we could kick the rubber ball. A, the balloon. Yes, some people say that perhaps the balloon would be easier because it's lighter. So it doesn't need a lot of force to kick it. But maybe the football, you know, it needs some force to kick it properly. And also some people think that the rubber ball or the orange would be too difficult to kick because they're smaller. It's like when you're trying to you know, hit a golf ball, it's not so easy because it's so small. Similarly, people think that trying to kick a rubber ball or an orange for somebody who is inexperienced or for a toddler, it might be too difficult because the surface area is too small. Of course, the egg would probably break. We would probably step on it and not kick it. So it probably wouldn't be the best choice. Okay. Which would fare better under pressure? Now, imagine that we have a vise, you know, the vise, which is the machine that kind of puts items under pressure. And we started to apply severe pressure onto these objects. Okay, we have a lot of consensus regarding the rubber ball. Okay. What's going to happen to the orange if we put it under a lot of pressure? It'll split, it'll squish, or it'll turn into orange juice. So that's what happens when we squeeze, which is kind of putting the orange under pressure. It turns into juice. So in this case, the pressure transformed the orange into juice. What about the egg? Now, there are a lot of videos on YouTube of people walking on cartons of egg. The way the egg is designed, the way it is structured, it is structured to withstand an enormous amount of pressure, given that that pressure is equally distributed on the surface area of the egg. So if you take an egg, put it in the palm of your hand, and then exert equal pressure on all sides of the egg, it actually can withstand enormous pressure. Or if you exert this pressure perpendicularly, the egg is at a perfect right angle, it can withstand an enormous amount of pressure. And I invite you to look up the videos online of people walking on egg cartons. So although the eggs seem to be fragile and that it really wasn't going to withstand pressure, but if we were to walk on a carton of eggs and evenly distribute our weight, the eggs would probably survive better than, say, the orange. Okay. Cold weather. Now imagine that we exposed all of these items to extreme cold weather. We're talking about -100. Which one would survive extreme cold weather? D, the orange. Okay. C, and there's a question mark. Okay. Okay, so let's examine what would happen to E, okay, for the egg. B, C, and E. Okay, so let's examine what would happen to the balloon if it's exposed to cold weather. Most probably the balloon will start to shrink in size because the air inside will start to kind of condense. And similarly, the football, because there's air inside and it will start to kind of condense and it'll seem like they're deflating. Now for the orange and the egg, the liquid inside would probably solidify, it'll freeze, and they would probably survive up to a point where they will explode when the liquid solidifies too much and it starts to expand. Okay, so let's look at the rubber ball. Now, when rubber is exposed to extreme cold weather, cold temperature, the elastic nature of the rubber changes and it becomes very brittle, as if it's made of glass. So the extreme cold weather or the extreme cold temperature, it transformed the nature of rubber. And now if we throw it or try to bounce it or kick it around, it actually shatters. So it still looks like a rubber ball, but the inherent nature, the elasticity of the rubber has changed and it's no longer elastic. And it actually became very, very, very fragile. And therefore, this new state that it's in, it's going to perform differently in previous situations where it used to perform better. Okay. Which one would survive extreme heat? Again, boiling temperature. We're talking about 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we have C, the rubber ball, E, the egg, E or D, E, D. Okay, E, the egg. Of course, what happens to the egg when exposed to extreme heat? If we put it in boiling water, we're going to end up with a boiled egg. So now we can drop it. It's not going to bounce, but at least it's not going to, splatter into a million pieces. We can throw it at a target and it'll still cause some damage. We can kick it around. So the extreme heat, it transformed the egg. It also transforms the other objects as well. Now imagine a person who has burnout. This person has been exposed, has been dropped from heights, has been thrown around and kicked around and put under pressure and put in cold weather and heat. And this is happening constantly for a prolonged period of time. If we're talking about a prolonged period of time, we're talking minimum of 6 months. And this is important to understand, because this is what differentiates between burnout and stress management. Because if burnout is just stress, why can't stress management techniques work? If a person is exposed to all of these kind of stressors for 6 months or more, can you imagine the state of that person? Even if this person was amazing and resilient in the beginning of those 6 months, again, this person has been dropped, kicked around, thrown, put under pressure, put in the boiler, put in the freezer, taken out of the freezer, thrown on a wall. And this is happening to this person constantly and for a long time. The person is going to lose, their resilience. It's only natural. However, if we can look at the situation differently, maybe there can be transformation that can occur to the person. It's just a matter of how we look at it. Because the thing is, these objects, these are all physical objects. They are ruled by the laws of physics. Human beings, we have a choice to be a balloon when the situation requires us to be a balloon, to be a football when the situation requires us to be a football, or to be an egg or to be an orange. We have the flexibility to choose how we respond to stress. But we need to have the capacity to do this. And this is what we're going to talk about in the second half of the presentation. Because when a person is exposed to stress constantly and for a long time, we might lose this capacity to respond to what is going on. And we just start to react to what is going on. There's a big difference between reacting and responding. And this difference lies in agency. And this is what we're going to talk about in the coming slides. Okay, so let's look at what happens to us if we're in this constant, I call it the loop of hell. I'm going to say this in Arabic for our Arabic speaking friends. Loop al-Gahim. This is what it is. This is being in this loop is what burnout is all about. So what happens? We start at a status quo. This is our status quo. This is our normal state. Our brain starts to pick up that something is going on around us that might require change from our part, or it's going to impact us in some way. Now, our brain is going to pick up this and going to send us a signal. These signals, they're either thoughts or emotions. We feel something or we get these thoughts. And the idea is our brain is just sending us a signal. Hey, something is going on that might need an action. So it sends us the signal and it waits. If we don't take an action, our brain will take the action for us, because our brain is there, or our mind is there, to keep us safe. It's a survival mechanism. So it believes that there's something out there that is threatening our status quo, the state of balance, the state of motivation, whatever the status quo is. Something is happening outside that is going to threaten this. It sends a signal for us to take an action, but we don't take any action. So the brain starts to take an action for us. And what the brain does, the brain can't make us move, but it starts to condition the body to take a physical action. We're going to discuss this a little bit more. And it starts to kind of instigate the innate response, innate impulses in our body to the emotions that were generated in the first step. Now, the thing is, if we stay in this cycle for a long time, eventually we're going to start to see everything through the lens of stress. So we're going to see everything as a threat. And we're never going to exit this cycle. Okay, so let's just wrap up the cycle again. Our brain picks up a signal that something is going on that's going to threats us. It sends us a signal in the form of emotions or thoughts so that we can take an action. When no action is taken, the brain or the mind takes an action for us. And then if we continue in this cycle, we start to see everything through the lens of threats. We see everything as threats. Okay. Now, when it comes to stress, what is the underlying emotion? These are the characters from cartoon Inside Out, and they represent the 5 basic emotions or fundamental emotions. We have anger, sadness, fear, joy, and disgust. When it comes to stress, which of these emotions is driving the stress cycle? Which of these emotions do we feel when we're under stress? Okay. So we have a lot. We have a couple of fears: anger, all except happiness, sadness, fear, fear, fear. Yes, of course, usually we feel multiple emotions at the same time. However, the driving emotion in stress is fear, because it's threatening. Something is going to threaten our status quo. And all we can do is just a simple adjustment. But when we start to see everything through the lens of threat, we really don't have the cognitive space to make a judgment call to say it's just a simple adjustment. It's not something big. So it originates in fear. Fear is the underlying emotion of stress. And therefore, the innate response that is associated with fear is fight, flight, or freeze response. When we are afraid of something, either we're going, if it's small enough and we can overpower it, we're going to fight this thing. If not, then we're going to run away. But sometimes we freeze. We don't know what to do. So let's go back to the cycle. Okay, so we're going about our lives normally, nothing, just working and happy and everything is good. And then we start to notice a lot of commotion in the office, and our managers keep going into the meeting room and coming out looking kind of pensive, and we don't know what's going on. And then we start to hear there's gossip. We heard that there's going to be layoffs. We don't know what's going to happen. They might start merging teams together. A lot of people are worried. So we start to pick up on all these cues that something is going on that is going to threaten my status quo. Now, the brain sends us these emotions, so it's usually rooted in fear. Of course, it can appear in multiple ways, and it's usually mixed with other emotions. So it can be fear and anger. It can be fear and anger and disgust. Of course, I'm just referencing the core emotions, but it can be anything. It can be frustration. It can be disappointment. But all of this is usually driven by fear. I'm afraid, or my mind is afraid, that the status quo, the state of balance, is going to be disrupted. So it's expecting an action. Again, an action can be that we can just go and ask our manager, what is going on? We've heard these rumors. Is there any truth to it? Is the company really going to be sold? We can go and ask our manager. We can go and talk to HR. Or we can just tell ourselves, it doesn't matter. My job is secure. I know that even if there's a merger, I'm fine. I'm safe. But when we don't take an action, and an action here is just acknowledging the fear. This is really what we're doing, acknowledging the fear. If we don't take an action, our brain is going to take over, and it's going to prepare our body for a fight, flight, or freeze response. And what it does is that it starts to secrete a lot of hormones. And of course, in fight and flight, there is this physical element. So it starts to prepare the body to take, to run away or to get into a fighting match or a shouting match. So there are all these hormones that are secreted to be used in a physical setting. But the kind of threats that we are exposed to really aren't really physical. They're all mental threats. Is my job safe? Will I be able to secure enough income to pay for the necessities? The guy that I like, will he reject me? Will I get a divorce? All of these are the kind of threats that we are exposed to. So naturally, our fight or flight response isn't going to be physical. But because we're staying in this stressful state and we're not taking an action that is appropriate to calm down our minds so that it knows that we've seen the indicator and we will respond accordingly. So the mind takes over and it starts to secrete all these hormones. And this is why we start to see everything through the lens of stress and through the lens of threats, because it's piling on. Again, it's a continuous cycle that is happening, and we're not dealing with these emotions. We're not dealing with these thoughts, and they're accumulating within us. And this is why burnout, or the prolonged state of fight and flight, which occurs because of burnout, they use this example of a downward spiral. They describe burnout as a downward spiral. Now, it starts in the beginning, it's quite wide, and we have little disruptions to our routine. But the more we stay in this cycle and we don't try to address what is going on, the more it gets narrow and it starts to constrict us and pull us downwards towards the exhaustion and towards hopelessness. And as you can see from these examples, it starts with sleep disturbance, and then fatigue, and then physical symptoms, and then irritation, then joy. It's pulling us downwards from just minor disruptions to really, burnout, if not addressed, the longer it lasts, it might lead into depression. There is a 20% overlap between burnout and depression, meaning that people who get burnt out, depending, of course, on a lot of things, if they don't address it, it can lead to depression. And it's because of this downward spiral. And I had a client of mine, she used a lovely metaphor. She likened it to a whirlpool, in the ocean or in the sea, when we get caught in a whirlpool and it just pulls us down. And these are her words. She said, if we resist it, it just pulls us down further. And sometimes we have to just accept and let go so that we can float to the top again. And this was a very powerful metaphor for me. So this is what burnout is like. And this is why I call it the loop of hell, because it's kind of continuous. It doesn't stop, but it's also progressive. And the term that it gets narrower and narrower, it constricts our world. We feel like we're suffocating, and then it pulls us down. And what started as fear might feed into anxiety, because again, we're staying in this cycle for a long period of time. And it's not only anxiety. What starts as fear, anger, disgust, frustration, when not addressed, it might lead to more harmful emotions such as anxiety, guilt, or shame. And these are called inhibitory emotions because they really inhibit life in general. When we are addled with these kind of heavy emotions, it's very difficult to go about our life. And we did speak about the guilt that people who experience burnout feel. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. Again, it's a progression. So again, progressing into these kinds of heavy emotions will lead to a destructive mindset, and it just becomes very difficult to perform when this is the kind of weight that we're carrying around. And again, some of the other side effects of staying in the stress cycle for a prolonged period of time, as we said, the body starts to prepare us for fight or flight by secreting hormones such as adrenaline, cortisol, all the stress hormones. And what happens is that these hormones, they cause the physical manifestations that we see in people who have burnout. And things like, I can't think straight. I know that there's something I have to do. I just can't organize my thoughts. This is because of the secretion of neurotransmitters, actually, not hormones. And because they stay in our body, we don't get rid of them. Again, unable to focus on tasks that, very easy. And we used to do them without thinking before, but now, even when I'm concentrating, I can't do these tasks. Of course, all the cortisol that impacts our immunity, and therefore we start to get sick more often. Like we get colds and things like that more often, and we never used to get that. Issues with sleep and also with appetite is one of the side effects of staying in this cycle for a long time. And all of this has to do with the fact that our body is secreting these hormones and we're not using them, so they stay in our body. And this is why one of the most used, I think, stress management technique is taking a walk. When somebody is under stress or even angry, we usually tell them, just go and take a walk, take a brisk walk and come back, you'll come back refreshed. The thing is, when I go for a walk, I'm getting rid of the hormones that build up. I'm doing a physical activity, so I'm getting rid of the hormones and the neurotransmitters that build up in my body. And that's why also when we're blocked and, when we're in a meeting and we're trying to solve a problem and we just can't figure it out, we take a break and go do something. And it's usually preferred to do something, physical, meaning standing or going outside just with movement. And you come back, you have a fresh start. It's really just getting rid of the hormones that build up in the body. So how do we bring back the spark? All of this before, we were talking about what is burnout, how does it impact us? So how do we bring back the spark? We have to break this cycle. When our clients come to us suffering from burnout and we're able to coach them, they don't need therapy, we work with them on breaking this cycle. Now, in the beginning, it doesn't really matter where we break the cycle, as long as we're able to break it. And once we give the client a little bit of relief, the client can kind of breathe and feel like, yes, I feel better. I'm not 100% where I want to be, but I feel better. We can start working on trying to break the cycle from the very beginning, being able to recognize the emotion when it's being evoked inside me, and being able to create a space where I can respond to these emotions, not reacting to it. But again, I always tell my clients in the beginning, it doesn't matter where we break the cycle. If we break it from here, which is we start everything we're seeing as a threat, let's start examining these things. Are they real threats? Are there some limiting beliefs that are really kind of limiting me from exploring other avenues? Maybe there's a cognitive bias. I'm seeing something that's not there. So we can challenge this while we learn how to read our emotions, because we need to learn emotional intelligence. And it's a learning process. So it's not going to happen between, in a couple of sessions. It takes some time. Or we can take actions, so, okay, fine, it's fear or whatever, we're stressed. Let's learn to take certain actions, stress journaling, go for a walk, whatever the techniques, the tools that we use to manage stress. So it's taking the action. The important thing is that we start to break the cycle and we don't stay in this cycle for a long time. So this is the stress part of burnout. However, sometimes the spark goes out, yes, because of stress, but sometimes the stress is internal. It's really not something external. It's not, difficult deadlines or difficult clients or a difficult manager or difficult times. Sometimes the stress is internal. And it has to do with shifting values, not nurturing our souls enough. So sometimes, yes, breaking the cycle is important, but it's not always. This works with external stressors. with things from the environment. But with internal stressors that are coming from within me, we approach it a bit differently. And this is where positive psychology comes in. Now, for those of you who don't know what positive psychology is, it's a relatively new discipline within psychology that focuses on the, yes, Marty, exactly. Positive psychology, one of the founders is Martin Seligman. So Maureen is reminding us, yes, Marty. Positive psychology focuses on how can we be psychologically healthy. And they, when they looked at psychology before, they saw that this discipline really focused on ailments, diseases, and how to recover from these diseases. But it really didn't address how can we become healthier psychologically. So Martin Seligman and with the other founders, they really wanted to address this question. Great. So we have somebody who is not depressed, who, he doesn't have any psychological diseases, but that doesn't mean that he's psychologically well. And this led to the science of well-being. So working on your well-being, yes, Martin Seligman and Peterson, thank you. So working on your well-being is a way to it's like an antidote to burnout to a certain extent. But well-being isn't something that you acquire and that's it. It's something that you work for continuously, kind of building. You sustain it continuously through activities. So it's similar to burnout in that it's continuous with you. So if you continuously do it, you will probably be able to prevent burnout in a way. But then some of the research started to examine burnout within the corporate context. And they asked themselves, if an employee doesn't have burnout, does that mean that they will be engaged? And if they are engaged, does that mean that they will flourish? So they wanted to answer this, because if we're going to look at burnout as if it's the disease part, so if we don't have this diseased part or this bad part, does that mean that the employee is going to be engaged? And if they're engaged, they're going to flourish? So they wanted to answer this question. And actually, Maureen, we're going to talk about character strengths in the next slide, inshallah. So they started to look at employee engagement. So they actually came to the conclusion that not necessarily so. No, just because a person, an employee isn't burnt out doesn't mean that they are engaged. And they started to measure 6 factors. They said that engagement is driven by 6 factors: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. And the more alignment there is between what an employee expects in these 6 factors and what exists in the company, the greater the match, the greater the alignment, the greater the engagement. And the bigger the mismatch, this might lead to burnout. It's not necessarily so. It might lead to burnout. Now let's look at these 6 factors. Workload is, the amount of work. And when they looked at it, it wasn't just the amount of work, but also the nature of work. So what I'm doing, does it enable me to use my talents or my strengths or not? Some jobs might even prohibit me from using my talents and my strengths. So I have something that it's innate, it's a part of me. And the more that I use it, the more engaged and energized I feel. But I'm in a job or in a company or in a department, doesn't have to be just a job, that's not allowing me to use these talents and to use these strengths. So the more I can use my talents and use my strengths, the more engaged I will be. And this comes under workload. Control talks about autonomy. And it speaks to, am I being micromanaged? Am I given enough room to make decisions related to my work? Or, am I just given the responsibility without the authority? And you'll find that also, depending on the signature strengths that a person has, the kind of control that they want over their work will vary. So someone who has ideation, I'm using now Gallup terminology. Gallup is it's a tool that we use to find out the innate talents that people have. And it's very similar to via character strength. They're two similar concepts. But someone who has ideation as a talent, they're fascinated with ideas, they're attracted to ideas. This person needs the freedom to brainstorm, to ping ideas off of other people. So if I take this person and put them like in a, yes, Gallup, the tool is called the Clifton Strength Finder. Thank you, Maureen. So if I take this person who has ideation, who needs to kind of be in the kitchen that cooks up ideas and be able to have the freedom to come up with ideas and brainstorm with others, and I put them like in on a desk in front of a computer, and I give them spreadsheets, and I tell them you have to enter all this data into the spreadsheet. This is your job. You can't think of ideas. I don't want you to think of ideas. I want you to do what you're told to do, and that's it. This person will feel constrained. They will feel that they don't have enough control over their work. But the kind of control that they need is the freedom to think of ideas. Now, somebody else who has self-assurance, for example, which is another Gallup talent theme, they need complete freedom to take all the decisions. So if I try to micromanage somebody who has self-assurance in their dominant themes or their signature strengths, this person is not gonna, probably the manager is gonna be in trouble, not the employee, because they can't tolerate this. So autonomy here really depends on what the person is looking for. Everybody probably needs freedom, I agree with that. So reward. Here with reward, we're not just talking about the monetary reward, we're talking about other forms of reward, and this is reward and recognition. And we'll also find here that strengths and talents play a role in reward. Again, referring to Gallup, if somebody who has the talent theme of significance in their dominant strengths, this person would probably want a certificate, employee of the month. He would probably want it published in a newsletter or stuck in a dashboard somewhere. So this is the kind of reward that this person would probably, he wants it to be announced. He wants the cachet of people knowing that he was employee of the month, or he wants to be assigned to one of the big projects. It depends on where he derives the significance. Or somebody else might be uncomfortable with being in the spotlight, so they would appreciate a one-to-one email, a heartfelt email from the manager to this employee, explaining why this person is employee of the month and thanking them and being grateful for the work they do. So again, the talents and the themes here, the talent themes and the strengths are playing a big part in how people are engaged in the workplace. And the more they become engaged, of course, engagement is a big element of well-being. It'll help them kind of, it'll give them immunity against burnout to a certain extent. We're not saying that this is a magic bullet, but it'll give them some immunity. A sense of community is the fourth element. And this is, do we have a sense of belonging in the workplace? Do I feel that I belong, or do I feel alienated in the workplace? Fairness here, it speaks to two things. First of all, do I feel that I am being dealt fairly? Or do I feel like there's injustice with the dealings within the organization, I feel like my manager is too hard on me, or, he's not fair in dealing with me. There's like things like nepotism or stuff like that. So this is what fairness might mean, but it also speaks to sometimes to the fairness within the industry. Do I feel like I'm working in an industry that is cruel to animals or cruel to the environment? So fairness, it can refer to both. Now, the last element here within engagement talks about values. And here we're talking about the alignment between the corporate values and the person's life values. Values here are life values, not career values. Everybody has things that are important to us. Every person has something that is important to us. We have a group of things that is important to us in our life in general and how we live our life. And we have things that are important to us in our career. And we have things that are important to us in our family. So in order to have engagement, we need to find alignment between personal values of the employee and the corporate values. And here, these are life values, not career values, because you can have fulfillment from career values, but you can still not feel engaged because there's not alignment between your life values and the corporate values. And when we say corporate values, we're not talking about nice slogans that are written on the wall and posters that are stuck on all the walls. We're talking about what happens really within the workplace. So if integrity it's a corporate value, and I have one of my life values is honesty, for example. However, I'm being told that I cannot disclose to a client that a problem happened with their project and there's going to be a delay. I'm told explicitly, no, you can't disclose this. What am I supposed to say? I'm kind of given, instructions to fudge it a little bit, I'm not told to lie, but I need to fudge it a little bit. So although the company says that integrity is one of our values, what they're actually doing isn't really coherent with that. If there isn't an alignment between the person's values and what happens in the organization, it will be very difficult for a person to find engagement in the workplace. So I always like to use this slide when I'm speaking to leaders, managers, or organizations. A lot of organizations now are trying to address burnout and trying to address well-being in the workplace and all of these amazing things. But when it comes to engagement, we need to look at these elements. And as we spoke about most of the elements, they're very specific to each and every individual. It's very difficult to make a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And also, it's not expensive. Because let's face it, this is what companies really care about, is how much it's going to cost. It's not expensive, and it's not difficult to kind of customize approaches for everybody. And this can simply be done through a strength-based management system. And the tools are there. And companies that implement a strength-based management system, they have high well-being rates within their organization. And this is very, very important. So I just wanted to show you guys this. Thank you so much. You're very, very kind. Regarding the recording, I'm not sure about the recording. However, I will send you the slides, inshallah, bi'Iznillah, at the end of the session on the chat. Okay. Another aspect or element, how can we use positive psychology to help burnout clients in coaching? Now, the thing is, once we enter this downward spiral, some clients, they might become hopeless. Will we be able to climb out? Can we go back to this stage again? So building on Martin Seligman's learned optimism theory, we can try to help them kind of examine their hopelessness if they're there. They're not necessarily going to be there. But we can start to help them to examine their hopelessness. And we kind of examine it in 3 dimensions. First of all, how pervasive do they see their situation? And when pervasive, we mean, is it impacting everything, all of our life, or is it in certain areas? And also permanence. Is this a permanent state, or when was the last time that you felt better? When was the last time that you felt worse? So it comes and go. And of course, personalizing. Is this only happening to me? Thank you, Maureen, for attending. You're awesome. Thank you so much. So, and this is how we use positive psychology a little bit to kind of challenge our clients if they're feeling hopeless. Again, these are advanced steps that we take. I want to remind you that a client who's experiencing burnout, they have been suffering for a long time. So trying to do these steps in the very beginning is going to be a little bit frustrating for our clients. So we have to offer them a reprise, something, just to breather so that they can breathe before we can actually challenge this and help them build their hope back again and become more optimistic that they can change. But this is something that we can use out of positive psychology, is just to challenge their perception about the situation that they're in. Is it going to last forever? It wasn't a forever thing. It's new. So if something is new, we probably can revert it back. Are you the only person who's experiencing that? Probably not. And lastly, is it impacting all of the aspects of your life? And here maybe we can refer to the wheel of life and look at the other aspects. Usually people who are experiencing burnout, they'll have an issue in their career or the professional aspect of their life, but the other aspects of their life probably will be okay unless they've been in the burnout cycle for a very, very long time. Okay. Now, another aspect that we also work on with our burnout client, and this comes from positive psychology, is we kind of work on the resilience. And in resilience, we want to work on their spiritual fitness. We really want to build up their spiritual muscles. And we want to tap into their sense of agency. This is very important. The client, we really have to work with our client so that they do for themselves. Every person is responsible for his or her own well-being. The company isn't responsible for the employee's well-being, but they try to enhance it. They try to provide services that their employees can use to build and enhance their well-being. But at the end, the person who is responsible for their own well-being is the person himself. So through spiritual fitness, we really want to tap into their agency to do for themselves. And this is where coaching helps. Because I know all of the ICF coaches out there have heard, that, oh, coaches, you guys don't do anything. I mean, one time a client told me, you don't want to get your hands dirty. You don't want to get down in the trenches with me. And I told him, I'm in the trenches next to you. I'm there with you, but you have to do for yourself. So by using a coaching approach, we truly empower our clients to find their agency. Because again, if we go back to this cycle, when they're in the pits of this downward spiral, it's very difficult to tell them, you can do this, you can do this. It's very, very difficult for them to believe that they can do this, that they can climb out of this downward spiral and find relief for themselves. But it's important that we try to work with our clients on tapping into this through spiritual fitness and resilience. And this is really what we try to do. We try to create agents of change. The person becomes his or her own agent of change. So they can go from burnt out to hopeful. And once they're in the hopefulness, then they can work on their spiritual fitness, and then they can sustain their agency for change and work on it. Now, the takeaway is, although it's kind of depicted in a straight line, but it's actually not a linear process. I mean, you can jump to hopefulness and then start working on the spiritual fitness and then go back to burnout. And this is what self-development is all about. It's never a linear process. How long does it take? It differs from one person to another. There is not a one size fits all kind of thing. So it differs. And the thing is, with burnout clients, some of the clients, once they get a little bit of relief, they might end the coaching engagement, which is their right. And there's really nothing we can do as coaches about this. But maybe we can just take a step further and make sure that they have like their affirmations or the action plans that they're going to do to maintain their well-being before we close the engagement. But it happens that they get a little bit of relief and they say that we're fine. And then a few months later, they come back and it's going to happen. But in order to reach agency, we have to let them we can't control them. How to ensure sustained results? It's by the agency, by empowering them to do it for themselves. And how can I live with my life until I get results? We have to give them there are no quick fixes, but there are quick wins. And this is where we kind of incorporate other positive psychology tools like gratitude, savoring some things, this gives them a little bit of a reprieve. And on that note, this is the last thing that we're going to present. This is the Wheel of Wellbeing, or the WOW tool. This is a tool that I created, and it's based on the concept of manage your energy, not your time, for productivity. It's not a new concept. It was published in 2000. The first article was published in the Harvard Business Review in 2007. And this is built on the concept that burnout is a depletion of energy. So maybe if I manage my energy better, I don't, fall into the pitfall of the downward spiral. So this is the tool. It consists of body, emotions, mind, and soul. And each one of these, I call them the 4 batteries, consists of three factors. And this tool is available. It's an interactive tool. It's available online at www.wellbeing.org. And it's like any other wheel. We ask the client to kind of assess their level of eating, sleeping, exercising, or their temperament, sense of belonging, self-love, where they are and where they want to be and how can they get there. And this tool just kind of, took all the research that I did for 3 years and also my own personal experience, and it kind of filtered into the tool. And the elements of the soul battery, which is self-integrity, I'll share the website in the chat. So if you look at the elements of the soul battery, which is self-integrity, purpose, and creativity, these are the elements that I use to build the spiritual fitness or the resilience of the client. And it's very much tailored to each person, because they start to explore their own life values. They start to explore their talents and their strengths and how to use them and how they show up every day. We start to explore meaning and purpose. In creativity, we also explore playing. And playing is such an important aspect of well-being. As adults, we have to continue to play. And playing, it helps with creativity. And if there's a physical aspect, it will help in the body, and of course, emotions, and also the mind. So playing is a very, 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 very important aspect. We have a question. Can somebody help me how to end this quote? There are no quick fixes, but there are quick wins. Quick fixes is somebody who wants, I'm burnt out. I want you to give me a couple of tips, and I snap out of it. It can happen. But quick wins, these are what we call low-hanging fruits. These are some exercises or activities that the client can do to feel a little bit of relief. The relief isn't momentarily, but if they stick with the activities such as gratitude or what went well today, listing their something called positivity ratio, which is another tool that we use in the positive psychology, mapping out their network of belonging, just who are the people to which I belong, and how do I interact with them? Also, some of the things that we can do in self-love. So these are activities that they can do regularly. It's going to give them a little bit of a breather. They're going to feel better. So we can start working on the source of the stress and where it's really coming from. When you're dealing with clients, you mentioned only psychological aspects, or you talk also about religious aspects. Okay, when it comes to religion, it depends. In self-integrity, we examine life values. Now, if religion or spirituality is one of their life values, then it'll come up in the discussion. It really depends on the person, because not everybody is religious. And this brings us back to agency. Every person knows what is best for them and how to get this. So we do touch base on religion or spirituality if it's one of their values, their life values. And this, we kind of examine it for the soul battery. Do you mean the circle of control? Are we talking about the networks of belonging or the circle of belonging? Would you like me to unmute you so you can? Okay, now the circle of belonging is, who are the people that give me a sense of belonging? Now, we feel belonging when we feel accepted. So who are the people who accept us as we are? With everything, with all our imperfections. Who are the people that we can be ourselves with we're not self-conscious? We don't think about every action. No, we can be very authentic with them. And we start to list them. And usually they are in circles. So we have like friends and family. But it's not everybody in my friends and family. It's X, Y, and Z. And then we might have pets. Sometimes people put pets in their circles of, so these are what I mean by the circle of circles of belonging. Okay, this is the website. Let me, wellbeing.org. So this is the website. Okay, this is my bio, it's not important. So this is the presentation. I hope it was beneficial. I mean, it's very difficult to go through everything within an allocated time frame. So I hope it was helpful. Whether coaches or clients were attending, and I hope it was beneficial and helpful, and you guys found what you, at least the expectations were being met. I'm going to convert the PowerPoint to a PDF, and I will send it over the Zoom chat. And also, someone from ICF Egypt, the Egyptian chapter, did share that the recording will be uploaded to, I'm not sure it'll be uploaded to, they said a page, but to be honest, really sorry, I don't know which page. Okay, where is it? Yes, here it is. So yes, it'll be uploaded to the ICF channel and be shared accordingly. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who attended. And again, my email, I wrote my email in the chat box. So anybody who wants to drop me a message, wants to ask any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And you guys can download the presentation before you leave, and I'll also share it with ICF Egypt chapter, and maybe they can also upload it to a shared folder somewhere or shared drive. I'm not sure regarding the recording. Maybe you can. It seems the recording, it will be on the Facebook page, correct? So yes, if you're not an ICF member, I think you can see the recording on ICF Egypt's Facebook page, correct?
Yes, Amira.
The presentation was sent on the chat box. If you scroll up a little bit, it's sent as a PDF file. You should be able to download it. Okay, so I mean, we have a few minutes left. Can we open the floor to questions? ICF Egypt, can we open the floor to questions?
Yes, sure. Questions coming to the chat, Coach Amira.
Okay, so how do I know whether I can help a person with coaching or I need to, I mean, we don't refer them to medication, but maybe I need to refer them to therapy. So this is a question: how do you assert whether someone needs to be referred for medication? There is a white paper from the ICF that discusses the markers, that if you find these markers in your client, that you should refer to therapy, and these markers can help. I mean, any case, it really doesn't matter whether they have they're suffering from burnout or not. Of course, anybody who has suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, there are certain red flags. We should definitely refer immediately to therapy. If the person is, we said that burnout usually impacts the professional aspect of a person's life. If the person's life is totally impacted, they can't do anything. Their life is completely disrupted. They're not socializing anymore. They go home and they isolate. All the markers of, this might be depression. If you have any doubt, refer to therapy. But you can refer to the ICF's white paper on referrals. And then a therapist is better equipped to diagnose if there is a diagnosis. Okay, what is the difference between a life coach and a positive psychology coaching? Okay, so a life coach is the term that is used for coaches in general. Positive psychology coach is a coach who uses positive psychology techniques. So I mean, this person can still be a life coach. This person can be a career coach. You can even use positive psychology coaching for relationship coaching. It's not topic dependent. It's just it's a discipline of study within psychology, and there are specific positive psychology interventions that we can use with coaching clients. So it's a technique. Can someone please share the presentation with me, as I don't see it? I think what we can do is, because there are a lot of emails here, I think when you guys register, and we have somebody who resent the file, thank you. I mean, I will share it with ICF Egypt. And I will tell you something. Nobody sends any messages on the chat, and I'm going to send it again. So if nobody sends other messages, it'll be the last file or the last message in the chat box, and you can find it. Okay. So I shared it once again. Just download it, and I guess that's it. Thank you so much for attending. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of burnout coaches, hopefully, inshallah, biznillah. And thank you so much.